चंद्रकांत जी। हाँ, चंद्रकांत जी। हेलो। हेलो। योगेश जी।
Yeah. Hi, Rajesh. हेलो।
हाँ हाँ, अच्छा आप हैं,
हाँ
ज्वाइन कर लिए, ठीक,
राजेश।
थैंक।
हाँ
हाँ हाँ, ठीक ठीक, थैंक। हाँ, अच्छा आ गया, ठीक, ओके, थैंक यू। अभी now it's 2:56. I think we have. So our speaker is here. Our esteemed speaker is here, I think. Na?
Sir, we will begin exactly at 3 if it is fine. Rajesh
Yes,
sir.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. And yeah, and if Chandrakant is there, please ask him to mute. Uh, you know, the other participants, except the speaker and the, I mean, person who is facilitating here.
All other participants are muted. So there are 3 minutes left. We'll begin exactly at 3.
Sure, sure. And our principal madam, has she joined?
Let me check.
Sure.
Ma'am hasn't
Very
joined
good
yet.
afternoon.
Someone. Good afternoon, sir. Ma'am hasn't joined yet. Somebody can call ma'am.
Oh.
Meanwhile.
Sure, I'm calling her, okay.
Okay.
पूर्णिमा जी.
Yes, sir.
Now let's start.
Okay, sir.
Hmm? हाँ.
I, Dr. Purnima, on the behalf of Department of English and English for Nation, Department of English for Sant Kanya Mahavidyalaya and English for Nation, welcome you to the 6-day international lecture series. And today is the first and inaugural session of this series. And first in order, I would like to call upon our principal ma'am, Professor Rachna Srivastav, to welcome our esteemed guests to this auspicious day of inaugural session. And I would request Principal Ma'am, please.
Purnima,
Yes, ma'am.
I think first you introduce the guest and talk about the theme a little bit, then call me
All,
to welcome.
all right, ma'am. For that, I would like to call upon Dr. Veena Singh to introduce the guest.
Yeah.
Our esteemed guest is Professor A.K. Mishra, who is currently working as Associate Professor in IIT, PhD. So I'd like to call upon Dr. Veena Singh to introduce the guest to the audience and to the participants. Sir, Veena ma'am is around. Rajesh sir.
She's still live with trying to connect. Maybe some network issue.
Okay, sir. Sir, meanwhile, if Nidhi Vats ma'am
She
is
will be
there, she
soon.
can
Yes.
introduce the about English for Nation and the seminar theme.
Yes. That would be fine. So, Dr. Yogesh.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima Singh and Dr.
Dr.
Rajesh.
Yogesh.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Yogesh from the Department of English, Delhi University. Um, about IFON or English for Nation, in a nutshell, I would love to share with you all that in order to give a kind of elasticity to the world of academia, we, which includes two other colleagues from the department plus two more than, and I, had been thinking for a long time, but during this COVID period, lockdown period, we just got out with the idea that we should start something online. And there we came up with the idea that a certain kind of elasticity should be included here. And for that, we thought of including not only people from colleges, universities, and research centers, but also from school system. And therefore, we brought in our whole platform, grammar and language. The second one, literature, theory. And the third is art, culture, and society, which also includes any social topic or any topic which is relevant for the current society. So keeping that in view, we just gave this a kind of a shape, and it is still taking shape because it has just born 3 months ago, I should say, though the idea was there for a long time. But we started with in June, we came up with a grammar workshop. Due to some technical issues, we could not move further on that. With one session, we have to postpone it, and the next month we are planning to go ahead with that. Then we had a talk on Walt Disney films by Dr. Shalini Singh, who happens to teach in one of the government degree colleges at Guna, MP. And then third initiative is with Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya. And after this, we are planning something from art, and especially that is on cartoon. But still, we are form. So this is something which is factual. So not only English Department of Delhi University faculty members are involved in, we have people from other universities and colleges such as we have from IP, Indraprastha University, we have from uh, Bihar, this is Central University of South Bihar, then Motihari, and likewise in Northeast also. So that is to say, this is just a concept, and we have just tried to give it a concrete shape, and that would be possible with the help of people working already in academia. So here at this point, I would like to thank our Professor Rachna Srivastav for accepting the coordination for accepting our request for going ahead with this kind of joint venture. And with this thank, I would love to put a kind of pause for the next speaker so that we can have much of time for listening our speaker. Thank you.
Sir, has Beena ma'am joined or yes, Beena ma'am has joined. So now I would like to call upon Beena ma'am to introduce our speakers to our participants and dignitaries. Please, Beena ma'am. Dr. Beena Singh, Head Department of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya. Ma'am, I would like you to kindly introduce our guests to the audience.
मैम अपना माइक्रोफोन ऑन कर लीजिए, माइक्रोफोन ऑन कर लीजिए स्क्रीन पर क्लिक करके। नहीं आवाज नहीं आ रही है। स्क्रीन पर क्लिक करके माइक्रोफोन अनम्यूट कर दीजिए।
हेलो।
यस मैम आ रही है।
Yes.
Ma'am, now you are audible.
Now you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the inconvenience that I have created due to some technical failure at my end. But anyway, once again, good afternoon, all of you. I missed my principal's welcome. But anyway, I know. Good afternoon, Rachna. Now, not wasting further time, let me just go ahead with the responsibility that I have been assigned. Friends, it is really immense pleasure and pride and privilege to all of us that in this pandemic era, we, the faculty of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, have been privileged with this lecture series. Dr. Rajesh Verma is to be applauded for it, for taking so much pains and organizing this. We all belong to the realm of literature. We are literary fraternities, and we all will agree that literature is the soul of all knowledge. And particularly, when you look into the literary text down the very beginning of the civilization, that how literary reflections and musings have been always a source of redemption, always upholding the positive values that sustain existence. And in this era of turmoil and turbulence, where there is so much anxiety and uncertainty related to so many things, we, the students of literature, would agree that our books, our literary text becomes the most the relevant rescue for us, redeeming us from the existing anxiety. I would love to introduce our honorable speaker, Professor A.K. Mishra. He is in the Department of Humanistic Studies, IIT BHU, a very renowned scholar. His PhD is in African American Studies. He has done a lot of work regarding humanistic communication and visual culture, narrative studies. He has been a corporate trainer in areas as of research communication, management communication, and health communication. A committed and passionate trainer enjoys research with trainees. He is engaged in the mission of literature for humanity. That is a particular course that he has designed, literature and coping skills, literature, how literature can be, for leadership through literature. These are some of his special areas that I would love to mention. Now, I don't want to come between audience who are eagerly waiting to listen, who is going to talk about, Professor Mishra is going to talk about literary studies and computer. And we all agree that in the present times, we are living in a digital world. We all have become the denizens of a virtual world, and how computers are so helpful today, And I will love to invite with great honor and pleasure Professor Mishra to come and deliver his talk on literary studies and computers. Thank you.
Now we'd like to welcome our principal, Professor Rachna Srivastav, to formally welcome the guest before he begins his inaugural lecture. Principal, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Purnima. And good afternoon to everyone. And Dr. Beena Singh, you did not miss my welcome because I was waiting for you first to address and then.
Oh, it's love to hear you. Love to hear you. Thank you, Principal Ma'am.
So it is very much true that technology is in fact helping us a lot these days, in these days of this pandemic. But also we are finding that we all are very much adaptable to this new means of communication. And we have been like participating in so many events. We have organized at VKM so many events because of the ease of this digital platform. And today, again, I find it a very welcoming gesture on the part of Department of English, Delhi University, that we are collaborating with them for organizing this workshop, English for Nation. Of course, language is an important part of education. And we all have been very much interested in literature. At least I can say this about myself. I was a student of English literature in graduation, and so many books I have read. And the more you read, the more your communication skill gets better, and it gets honed. So it is very necessary that we read a lot, and also that we should spread this light, this enthusiasm amongst all our youngsters also, so that they get interested in reading, not only in typing short messages, but in writing, in reading and all. I believe this workshop will help our students in this purpose, and our students of PG and UG must be participating in this. I believe Dr. Rajesh Verma must have taken care of this. Also, I would like to welcome our today's guest, Dr. A.K. Mishra, and as Dr. Beena Singh had introduced him, that he has been working in the field of communication skill and has been a trainer for corporates also. So I believe that our students will also, and we ourselves will also gain from his address. Once again, on behalf of Basant Kanya Mahavidyalaya Kamacha, I welcome all of you, and I also applaud the effort of Department of English, VKM, for organizing this 5-day workshop. I know that I may be like sounding very hasty. In fact, I have just come from the college, and so many things have been there, and some are still in my mind. So I may be sounding a little hasty, but again, welcome to the workshop, and thank you for the collaboration, and keep up the good work. So, Dr. Mishra, you are please welcome to address us. Thank you so much, Purnima. Now you can take over from me.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, we welcome you on this day, and we welcome you to begin with your lecture, because you like to hear your words and you like to gain from your knowledge that you have in your field. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima, and thank you, Dr. Veena Singh, for using those wonderfully kind words to introduce me to the participants. But before I move on, I need to check it with the organizers, especially Dr. Purnima. Please let me know if I'm audible or not.
Sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for confirming that. Dr. Veena Singh has been extremely kind in using those words to introduce me, and Dr. Rachna Srivastav, the principal of the college. She has also been extremely kind in introducing me to this group, this congregation, through those wonderful words. I'm really thankful to two people, especially Dr. Yogesh Dubey from Delhi University. Dr. Dubey, thank you very much for coming up with this innovative idea, English for Nation, and Dr. Rajesh Verma for collaborating with Dr. Dubey to make this happen here. That was wonderful. Moving on, I must say that when a speaker is introduced through so many nice and heavily loaded words, that puts a lot of pressure on the speaker. And I don't exactly know whether I'll be able to relieve myself and the participants of those pressure or not, but I'll definitely give it a good try. And I hope towards the end of this session, we'll be in a position to say that, yes, we are returning with something meaningful, something informative, and something substantial. So that is the whole idea. I'll tell you that this particular area, that is literatures and computer, or literary studies and computers, fall within the ambit of digital humanities, which has emerged as a huge umbrella term, and that takes within its realm various multiple disciplines and certain interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary projects as well. So if you're interested in this particular area, that is digital humanities or computational literary studies, CLS, you can either visit the internet and look for some authentic and good material to build a base of your understanding of this particular area, or you may allow me to share some very interesting and very authentic documents with you so that you can go through them and try to understand and develop a better insight into this particular area. So why I am saying this to you is because I'm not going to make any huge claims, because within 40 to 45 minutes, it's not possible to talk about the entire area and its implications for us, students of literature or literary studies. So what I'm going to do, and that's the plan for this session, I'm going to talk about what this area is and why this area is emerging as such an important one, and why we need to take a serious look at this particular area and how this area can help us understand or develop a better insight into our understanding of literature. This may sound a little bizarre and quixotic or chaotic at the beginning, because this is a wild, wide idea. That's exactly how most scholars across the globe responded to the whole idea of digital humanities or computational literary studies. When it was about computational linguistics, people did not react in the same manner. But when the world began to talk about computational literary studies, the reaction and the response were very, very different. So I'll also try to chart why these reactions and responses were so in the beginning. And then I'll also take you through the world of computational literary studies and tell you what it does and why it is so much obsessed with literature. Why literature when there are so many other disciplines, other spheres of knowledge, like history, psychology, sciences, engineering disciplines, and various other disciplines, medical sciences, agricultural sciences. Why is it that suddenly this field of computational analysis is interested in literary studies? So where is the meeting ground and how do they meet? Whether this meeting is a logical, is a fruitful one or not. So these are some of the things that will come across during this session. So please allow me a few seconds to share my screen with you, and then we'll move on. In the meanwhile, I must also tell you that Google is experiencing a lot of problems today. So in case I lose connection with you, that will be for a brief period only. I'll immediately return and resume this session. So this blackout should not create any anxiety in you. So I'm sharing the screen. Okay, just a moment. So is the screen visible to you? Please confirm, Dr. Purnima.
Not yet, sir. Not yet.
Okay. I've already shared the screen. So let's hope it visible in a while. I'll stop sharing and share it again. So that because as I told you, I conducted a training session for faculty members this morning, and we experienced several glitches, including blackouts as well. So
now it is coming, sir.
Okay. So is it visible to you? Is the screen?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Fine. That's great.
Not here.
So,
not here.
Yes.
No,
so
is it like
screen is not.
Okay, just a moment. I'll do it again for you. I'll stop presenting and return to the presentation tab again. Yes.
Sir, you might be facing connection issues. So you may just switch off your video and just share the screen.
No, there are no video issues because I'm using a very fast connection. But as I told you, Google has very recently reported around 12:45. Google reported that they are experiencing certain network issues in India today.
Yes,
sir. Now
yes, sir. That is true.
Now we can see.
Is it visible? Right.
Yes, sir.
So, do I need to enlarge?
Not visible.
It's okay. I mean, either I switch to slide mode, the slideshow mode, or I can keep this so that I can easily switch between the two modes.
Yes, sir. It is there now on the screen. Yes.
Okay, it's on the screen, and is it clear to you? Is it clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Fine. Thank you for confirming.
Slide would be better.
Yes.
We can't see. We are watching you only.
Mobile?
We can't see the screen, and that kind of report was given by many other people also.
No. Now it is coming,
please,
Dr. Yogesh.
So let's go
it
for
is there on the screen.
screen is visible. You can,
Sorry?
those who can't see it, please
Yes.
click to Dr. Ajit Kumar Mishra's share screen portion. Then you can see the screen properly.
Okay,
The participants can click to that.
okay, let me see.
The screen. So if that is the case, I
Yes.
was actually talking about using the slideshow mode or this mode, the normal view mode. Is this okay? Is this view mode okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for confirming. So let's not waste any more time on this. So that's literary studies and computing. I mean, the moment you come across the whole idea of it, because two disciplines are coming together and creating a totally new one, and such a meeting is not always taken in the right spirit at the beginning. But despite all the reservations and all the challenges and all the disputes it experienced, this has emerged as an important area in literary studies and even in computing. It's not that computing has contributed a lot to our understanding of literary studies. It's vice versa as well. Literary studies has also contributed immensely to the world of computational analytics or analysis. So they are complementary to each other. So we'll see how they are complementary and why they are complementary to each other. So let's move on. Now, this is what you mean by simulation. I'm sharing the whole screen with you now. So literature as simulation. Now, that's a very interesting idea. And that's exactly where we can see the meeting ground between computers and literature, or computational analysis and literature, computer studies and literature, or literary studies. So literature as simulation. This is the biggest attraction that computer studies found in literary studies. That's one big reason why computers have become an integrated aspect of literary studies today, and why computer has discovered solace for itself in literary studies. Because of this particular quality, that is a hallmark of literature. Now, as students of literature, we have grown up with the idea of what is literature and why must somebody study literature? What will literature give to us? How will literature transform our lives? These are some of the questions that we weather when we decide to opt for a career in literary studies at the beginning. So most of us have passed through these questions, and most often we find answers that will pacify at least us the anxiety that the anxiety that is and that is created in us because of these questions. So as we have moved further, we have discovered that yes, literature is probably the biggest form of simulation. But before I talk about how literature is simulation and how computer as an area in simulation can see this particular or can discover this particular element in literature, let me take you through the whole idea of simulation. Now, if you look at what simulation is all about, this basic definition of simulation. Now, you can see on your screen that simulation is a recreation of a real world process in a controlled environment. So these two things are very, very important. When you come across any simulation model, it's actually a recreation of a real world process. You get to see a recreation of something that happens in the real world in the form of the simulation model. So it's a recreation of the real world process. This is one important element. And the other is it is done in a controlled environment. So the environment needs to be controlled so that the real world process can be recreated. This is so because the recreation will be subjected to changes and modifications if the environment is not controlled. So the environment needs to be controlled. Therefore, this form of simulation, this aspect of simulation, actually draws our attention towards the whole idea of simulation. That's one. And the other is this. Now, it involves creating laws and models to represent worlds. So you create certain laws and a model, at least one model, to represent the world. If you do not have a model to represent the world, then you cannot represent the world in the simulation model. I mean, using simulation, you cannot represent the world if you do not create a model, a simulation model. And then once you run those models and you allow participants to join and interact with those models, you can see what really happens. So once the model is ready, it can be allowed to interact with the participants. That means the interaction stage comes after the model is ready. And then to the last aspect of it. We all know that simulations are used for scientific explorations, for safety tests, and to create graphics for video games and movies. Now, this is a very important pointer as it has missed a very important element. So it names almost everything, exploration, especially scientific exploration, and safety tests, graphics, video games, and movies. But it doesn't name literature, which is very surprising. Why I say it should have named literature is because of this. I'll take you back to the first pointer. So look at this pointer. When I told you that it is the recreation of a real world process. What happens in literature? What exactly do we come across in literature or the literary animals? We come across the real world processes. One character interacts with the other. There is anxiety, there is anger, there are all kinds of emotions that we come across, that we encounter and negotiate in everyday world processes, in everyday lives, through our lived experiences. So literature is nothing but a recreation of the real world processes. So the first aspect of simulation confirms that literature is also a befitting subject for simulation, because it is a recreation of a real world process or real world processes. Whatever is happening around the world gets reflected in literature. And that is the biggest reason why for a long, long time, students of literature and professors of literature have held this view strongly, that literature is a reflection of society, of this world, the larger society, of this world, of this globe. So because of this recreation quality, recreation of a real world process, now you come to the second aspect of it. It involves creating laws and models. So how do you represent the world? How do you talk about the real world processes through the pages of literature? You need to devise certain laws and models. So what are those laws? The laws of writing, the laws of representation. And through those laws, you create models. What are those models? Those models are those forms of literature that come to us in the form of poetry, prose, and fiction, and then drama, performative texts, and even cinema. So these are the models that help us, and these models are governed by certain laws. And we all know that the laws that govern poetry are not exactly the laws that govern the world of drama or fiction. We have different models. We may have extended models. We may have modified models to represent the world. And these are the models. And we may modify the laws to create these models, and you all know that. So this particular aspect of the whole idea of simulation also focuses or brings us closer to literature and brings literature and computers closer to each other. Now, this is exactly where this definition misses out on literature. It has not named literature, but it has named something which is a form of literature. Now, these days we call cinema a form of literature. So, I mean, if you go through Elements of Literature, this famous volume called Elements of Literature, you find a segment in films or cinema as an element of literature in that. So that's how literature as a simulation is in fact an area of interest not to us, but also to the world of computers. That's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it that now what exactly literature is all about? It is about experiences. It is about the visualization of our emotions. It is about the extension of our emotions that we would probably not be able to experience in a lifetime had there been no literature. So, as an individual, it would not be possible for me to experience all kinds of emotions or see my a particular emotion of mine to shoot up and get extended, get reflected, get represented in some form. It may not be possible, but literature allows it that privilege because it's full of characters, experiences, interactions, feelings, knowing, realizing, naming. That is how the entire world of literature is governed. So literature is full of experiences, and these experiences that we carry to the classrooms, that we carry to our students, and these experiences that we carry to each other, in fact, act as simulation. I'll cite an example after a while to explain. I mean, an example of neuroscience to explain how literature is in fact a form of simulation through experiences. Okay, so I'll keep it in reserve for a few moments. If you have any queries or so related to this particular segment, we can take them, or you can note down your queries so that when I'm through, we can take up those questions. I would love to respond to your questions and queries at the end, as you find it fit. So what do you say, Dr. Purnima? Shall I continue and then we can take all the questions at the end? Dr. Purnima or Dr. Rajesh Verma?
Yeah, sir, we will take the questions at the end of the lecture, sir.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you then. Well, that is how we move to. Now, this is, as I told you, I'll cite an instance from neuroscience to tell you how literature is actually a form of simulation. And this simulation model is created through experiences. So I'll show you what happens to the human brain. You can see the anterior view and the posterior view of the same human brain. We can focus on either. Since all these things couldn't have been highlighted, these two views have been used in this image. What you're getting to see several things. This temporal poles, okay, and precuneus, and there's temporoparietal junction, this one. And you can see these areas. There are certain areas in the brain that are highlighted. For example, this particular area, this is highlighted, and this is highlighted, and these two are also highlighted. Now, why are these highlighted? This is the image of your brain when it comes across a literary text, a literary work, especially stories. Neuroscience has proved that the human brain is a story-loving brain. That's why we call the human brain a story-loving brain, because the human brain is hardwired to respond naturally and inherently to stories. And whenever we come across stories or literary works, these parts of the brain suddenly get highlighted. They lit up, they respond, they become active. When so many parts of the brain become active, what's happening? You're charged, you're energized. And there's something that happens here, and I'll talk about it. Something very, very important happens here, this in this frontal lobe. And that is the most important thing for our understanding of literature as simulation. So I'll talk about this particular experience, this particular happening a little later. So this is how your brain appears when you are experiencing, you're interacting with literary texts, not mechanically, but in an engaged manner. So, I mean, if I have to cite an example from a very famous literary critic, Longinus, so he was the first critic who said that sublime feeling needs to be created through literary interactions, through literary experiences. If the sublime doesn't happen, then there is no experience, there is no interaction, everything is mechanical. So this is exactly what neuroscience means by the sublime. It has a different name for the sublime. I'll tell you what the name is after a while. So now that proves that our brains are story-loving brains. I mean, the brain is a story-loving organ that we have. So, and this is proved by the theory of the mind network, how the mind responds to stories. The theory of mind network, it has been proved. Since we do not have much time, this is a short session. I will rather, encourage you or invite you to read at least something about the theory of mind networks so that you get to know how the brain is hardwired to respond naturally to stories. Now, the brain is story-loving because these are the two most important hormones that get secreted every moment. So the human beings experience safe and survival mode emotions periodically at intervals. It's not possible for a human being to be in the safe mode. Safe mode means you're feeling comfortable, you're not anxious, you're not depressed, you're not disturbed. Okay, so since you're students of literature, I'll cite an example from Daffodils by Wordsworth. Look at the first line in Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud. So look at the word, the use of the word wandered. Lonely as a cloud. So this wandering, this movement has been compared to that of the lonely cloud. That movement of the lonely cloud. So you see two things that work as pointers that the speaker, maybe Wordsworth, maybe somebody else in the poem, is not comfortable and not at ease with himself and with the world. Therefore, the speaker says, I wandered, this wandering motive, and then lonely. So loneliness and wandering, when we bring them together, we can understand that the speaker is experiencing a survival mode emotion. Survival mode emotions are those emotions that challenge our existence, that disturb us, that put us to distress. So these are the emotions. So those are the emotions that push us to the survival mode. But as you know, we humans love to fight our way back to the safe mode. That's how, and that's why humans are very, very special. And this is also true to all animal kinds, because we belong to this animal kingdom. It's very true to the animal kinds. We all would like to fight our way back to the safe mode. And that's why this life is very, very beautiful, because there is a constant battle between the survival mode and the safe mode emotions in this mind, in this body. And this gets reflected in literature. That's the reason why I called literature a simulation. It's a simulation model for all of us. So whenever we experience survival mode emotions, this particular hormone is secreted, cortisol. There's a disturbing emotion, distressing emotion. Now there is a fight, there is a struggle to return to the safe mode. And when we are fighting our way back to the safe mode, and when that actually happens, during that period, this particular hormone gets secreted, oxytocin, or to some extent, dopamine as well. So these hormones get secreted and we feel safe. Now, these aspects will help us why computer science is so much interested in the human brain in literature, because literature is a minefield. It's a mine, a rich mine of all these experiences. Where else would you find, an annal of an anthology or a collection of several millions of experiences and emotions than in the annals of literature? So that's one big reason why literature, or the field of literature, is perceived as a huge data set. It's a minefield full of data that can be mined in order to develop a greater understanding into human experiences. So that's the reason. And there is a third point, which is also equally important. And this is exactly where I'm going to talk about this frontal lobe thing. Now, on the basis of a certain study, this has been established. The brain activity of both storytellers, for example, John Keats or Charles Dickens or Shakespeare, they all are storytellers. And story listeners, we, the students of literature, are story listeners. Now, the brain activity of these two sides start to align, respond to each other, align brain cells that fire only when we perform an action. Not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe someone else perform the same action. Now, this is the most important aspect of it. And this theory is called the theory of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. You can see the frontal lobe. This is where the mirror neurons are located. Okay. And very, very fortunately, we have an Indian neuroscientist, G. Ramachandran, who has popularized this idea of mirror neurons. Today he is considered to be a pioneer in this field of mirror neurons. So there was a time when the world had rejected Ramachandran. They said, mirror neurons are a fancy, are a form of wild imagination. They cannot be mirror neurons in the human brain. Now, Ramachandran took several years to study and study and study, and finally he found the results. Today, the entire world has accepted that yes, mirror neurons are located here, and whenever, and these mirror neurons are fired when we perform an action. Every time we perform an action, we do so because it is driven by a certain emotion. So there is an emotion that leads to the secretion of a certain hormone in the body, and that emotion leads to a certain action. So whenever we perform an action, the mirror neurons are fired. But we know that we do not perform all actions. When we see other people performing actions, or actions that we had expected to perform or we would like to perform, these mirror neurons are also secreted. They are also fired. And we can see a connection between us and the person performing that task. To explain this point, I'll cite an example. You might have seen that when you watch a film, after a long period in the film, in which the villain has had the upper hand and the hero has been subjected to suffering, trials, and tribulations. So suddenly, towards the end, when the hero begins to beat the villain, you clench your fists. You feel good. And sometimes you express yourself by clapping and even whistling. Why do you do that? Did the hero ask you to do that? Did the producer or director or the cinema hall owner, did anybody ask you to do that? Or the person sitting next to you? No one. You feel like doing it because you suddenly experience that the mirror neurons are fired. They fire. And there is a connection. So you leave your position as a spectator and become one with the performer. So that is the power of literature. The power of literature that is experienced by the brain. So because of this mirror neuron thing, computer studies is genuinely interested in studying literature. So that's the second aspect of it. So that's how, I keep telling that literature is a simulation. It's not as a simulation. It's in fact, literature is simulation because it is all about how we experience, how we understand the world around us. These are the three stages through which we understand. We realize, we know, and then this is the most important part of it. Naming. Name it to tame it. I have a certain feeling in me, but I don't have a name for it. I suddenly come across a piece of poetry in which I have a similar emotion, a similar experience. I suddenly release my emotion. I suddenly name my emotion. I feel comfortable. So that's the reason why literature is simulation, because there is an expressive urge in us, in each of us, which forces us to express ourselves, to overcome silence in some form or the other, either actively or passively. The whole idea is to overcome silence. So that's the reason why, I'm sorry, that's the reason why literature is simulation. And computer studies, or the world of computers, is governed by the idea of simulation because computers do that for us. They show us a replica or a representation of real life or the real world happenings through a simulation model. So literature also does that. It has been doing that even, much before computer studies discovered that this can be a very powerful method of understanding and representing the world around us. So now that's how we come to the whole idea of literature and computers and how the meeting ground actually occurred. Why is it so? Now, this is the only. People have found many reasons, but I have found the only reason, and that is this reason. I call this data lust. It's a strong greed, desire. This is data lust. So now this data lust has always been there. It's not that we are experiencing it or we are getting to know about it recently in our times, in contemporary times, and it was not there earlier. That's not the thing. Now, to explain this point, let me use this example. You all know that people are still studying Shakespeare. By using classical approaches. I'm not talking about contemporary approaches. By contemporary approaches, I mean computational approaches. Let's not get into computational approaches right now. So let's think about classical approaches. People are still trying to understand Shakespeare by using the classical approaches. Now, isn't that interesting? It's been around 400 years since, even more than 400 years since Shakespeare died. And still, people are studying Shakespeare. They are revisiting Shakespearean texts with a desire to find something new. And what do you think they find? They ultimately gather some data. What do you find when you conduct research into some text, a literary work? What exactly do you find? So you find data, nothing else. So this data lust has always been there with critics, the researchers of literature. Similarly, as it is there with the researchers in other fields as well. We all die for data. We all live for data. So it is a very strong data lust that governs our critical, endeavors or enterprises. So whether it's classical approaches or modern contemporary approaches, it is the data lust. Now, the only difference between these two approaches is that when you adopt a classical approach or a traditional or a conventional approach, the chances for you to gather enough data or layers of data is minimized. Minimized because you adopt your human abilities to dig deeper into that, into the layers of a certain text, and then come out with some data. So you struggle with the phrases, the sentences, the clauses, even the diction, then derive some data on the basis of. And most often, if you think about it, your findings are premised upon your background information. So if you try to understand how conventional approaches have approached literary texts, you'll find that most often we are driven by our training in a certain system. It can be a theoretical system, can be any other system, a sociological system or theoretical system or any other system. So our background in that system, our training in that system actually determines how we approach a certain text. So that's one big reason why most often our approaches are driven by our background information. And most often we do not see what we should have seen. I'm quoting Pierre Maturin, a French theorist, who kept on telling that a text is important not for what it says, but for what it doesn't say. So that's exactly, he was pointing towards data sets, those data sets that do not meet the naked eyes. And human abilities are limited. We all know that. Although we have created machines that have excelled us, but those machines have greater abilities in certain contexts. And we know that very, very well. So when it comes to the contemporary approaches, the same data lust remains intact. In fact, it has grown manifold multiple times. It has multiplied. Now, the reason why it has multiplied is because of our access and our control, our access to and our control over these machines that we call computers. Now we understand that if we program a certain software in a certain manner, it can delve or dig deeper into the text and bring out something that we were not able to. And that's the biggest reason why the meeting ground was prepared. And it was a fertile meeting ground, of course. Do not misread my statement as one that supports this meeting, but then we need to adopt a critical approach to our understanding of this meeting. So this meeting ground between literature and computers was actually premised upon one big element that we call data. So what we derive data. Now this time, the data that we derive by using contemporary approaches can be quantifiable. that is the biggest advantage of using computers in our understanding of literary texts. We can quantify that data. For example, how many times does a character in a certain novel uses the word shut up? Now it will be very, very difficult for you to count, go on counting. Okay, and if you increase the data set, how many times does a character say keep quiet? How many times does a character say I'm not interested? So if you bring them all together, it will be very difficult for you to go on counting the numbers throughout a text. But if you can design software, or if a software can be designed to find these things and the text is subjected to that software, it can quickly tell you that uh, 35 times or 750 times the character says this, 950 times the character says that, and 1025 times the character says the other thing. It easily count. Now imagine I'm talking about just one text. If you are in this or corpus, then imagine how difficult it is going to be for you. Same is the case with literature review. These days, we have access to millions of study material on a particular area. Now, how do you attempt a literature? That's a big challenge. So, how do you attempt a literature review? Now, we have a certain technique which is called CARP, Computer Assisted Research Profiling. So you need to make a research profiling. Earlier, people used to do that. Research profiling is nothing but to find which texts are useful and which texts are not. Since the number of texts was limited, it was easier for the humans to perform the task. Now the number of texts is not limited; it is unlimited. So how do we do that? So with the help of computers, this is being done. This computer assisted research profiling. So you put all those research material into that software. It will quickly, you design your research ideas. These are the areas I'm looking for, and I have 2,70,000 study material. Now I'm going to use a computer assisted research profiling on those material, 2,70,000 material. So to look for these particular thematic patterns in those texts. So now when you adopt research profiling method, then it will tell you that in only 5,000 material, there is a thematic pattern of this particular thing. So you can easily discard all other material right away. So that process is made easier by computer-assisted research profiling. So that is, but whatever it is all about data. I again repeat, because it is a data lust that has brought scholars in computers to the world of literature, and that has also taken scholars in literature to the world of computers. So it's a complementary relationship. So again, computer literature, the meeting ground. You see, initially that was the response. What are these machines do? I mean, you might be also experiencing similar concerns. I mean, are these machines going to count angels in Milton? How many angels are there in Milton? Or measure Hemingway's sentences? Because Hemingway was very, very famous or notorious. You decided for yourselves to use long sentences. Okay, so is going to measure Hemingway's sentences, or would mathematical profiles of style determine if St. Paul wrote the epistles or if Thomas More wrote one of Shakespeare's plays? What kind of modeling or profiling we can do in order to understand whether Thomas More wrote at least one of Shakespeare's plays? So what are these machines going to do? These are some of the questions that people who are recently introduced into the world of computational literary studies generally raise. So, to give you an information of what kind of things are happening in computational literary studies, that is CLS, and this is computational literary studies, CLS. They are studying this particular thing now. The authentic versions of Dryden's works are being untangled by a computer from a thicket of early editions. So they are using multiple editions of Dryden's works in order to find whether there was any interpolation or extrapolation or any modification, several things. Now that's the reason why it is they're also identifying certain stylistic critiques, stylistic specialties that keep or that differentiates one from the other, the stylistic critiques. So these are some of things that are happening. So therefore, the meeting ground has become very, very fertile now. Well, now that brings us to the world of computational literary studies. So now most people think that for years altogether, centuries altogether, literary scholars have been trying to understand literary works through, by adopting various approaches. But still, they are at the iceberg's tip. A lot needs to be discovered because the largest part of the iceberg still lies hidden. And it is the responsibility of computational literary studies to delve deeper and dig it up for the world of literary scholarship so that people get to know about these things. What do these people do? In computational literary studies, everything is not attempted. The first thing that is attempted is authorship or attribution. And how is it done? It is done through the quantification of literary styles or stylistic devices, stylistic approaches. We all know that we all are unique and nature has made us so. Therefore, we have different fingerprints. Our fingerprints differ from each other. And that also tells us, informs us that we have different styles of doing the same thing. Because we are unique. We think about a particular thing in a unique and a different manner. And we also perform our tasks in different ways. Given an opportunity, we perform our tasks in a different way. I'm not talking about the Indian examination systems in which people are expected to write similar answers. Okay? So, if the literary styles can be quantified, then we can always attribute authorship to a person. For example, think that Dryden was the poet laureate of England, so he had a certain patronage from the royal family and the government patronage as well. So it might have happened that Dryden had usurped somebody else's, a minor writer's works, and had presented to the world as his work. It might have happened. You never know, because we don't have any witness, we don't have any proof or evidence to confirm that all works written by Dryden actually belong to Dryden. Okay? So we can see a sudden shift from this heroic couplets to iambic lines. You know that when he wrote this heroic tragedy, All for Love. So there was a sudden switching, there was a sudden shift. Now this can be of interest to the computational literary scholar. So was this switch a deliberate? Was it a conscious choice, or there was something fishy? So you can study that. You can apply computational analysis on all of Dryden's work and try to find out the stylistic elements. And if you see distinct differences, then you can always say that yes, there are distinct. How can one person be so different in one's stylistic approaches? So that's exactly what computational literary studies can tell you. It's not humanly possible because it has to be refined in such a manner that it comes out in a large way, in a big way. So that's the power of computational literary studies. Now, this is the biggest. I mean, this area is of interest to me. I've been studying this particular area for some time now. Big data, as you all know, uh, big data is ruling the roost in contemporary times. So uh, everyone is talking about big data. Everyone is talking, running after big data. So everyone is madly after big data. You'll not find a greater rush than the rush for big data. You can always compare this big data rush to the gold rush in California, in the United States of America, long, long ago. So after that rush, the gold rush, we are experiencing a similar rush in our times, and that rush is the big data rush. Everyone is running after big data. What is big data and why is it so important? Let me explain quickly. Big data, as you know, as the title suggests, as the name suggests, is huge data, data that you cannot even imagine. It's so huge data, and data that you are not thought of. You're not thought that this amount of data can be mined. So that is big data. And why is it so important? Because big data allows us to develop insights and critical understanding of those areas that were treated as extremely private and personal, therefore restricted or prohibited areas of knowledge and understanding. So big data allows us to understand that. I'll give you an example, a very everyday popular example to explain how big data is being used by big brands to mine impossible data, unexpected data. For example, you're using Netflix. You're a Netflix fan, which most people these days are, and especially in the post-COVID era, people have become fans of these online platforms, Netflix, and then those Hotstar and various other platforms. So Netflix, you might have noticed if you have a Netflix account, the day when one fine day you open your Netflix app, and suddenly you see that it has suggested you a few movies to watch. Then you wonder, how is it? And you suddenly say, yes, I wanted to watch these movies. How do you think Netflix came to know about it? They studied your search patterns, viewing patterns, because they have employed bots inside their platforms, and these bots are working day and night. The moment you type something in Netflix search box, they know that you like that particular area. Same is the case with Amazon shopping or Flipkart shopping. Now, if one day you search for a few things, the other day those things will be shown to you. Apart from those things, there will be a list of recommended items, similar items, which will make your task easy. Yes, I wanted to look for this. I wanted to search. I was about to search, and Amazon has made my task easier. Thank you, Amazon. Now, they are studying your behavioral patterns, your approaches, and they are creating big data. They had never known what one Ajit Mishra sitting in Varanasi would like. Is it possible humanly? There are millions of people in this world. How would they study the behavioral pattern of each and every individual, each and every consumer, and then understand it? So that was humanly impossible. And this has made it possible. So that's how we come to the idea of distant reading. This is no, this is the opposite of close reading, and we all know that as human critics, we have always adopted close reading as a method to our understanding and analysis of a literary text. But computational literature, literary studies, adopts distant reading, which is popularized by Franco Moretti, okay, the Italian philosopher. Distant reading. And then we come to because the whole idea is reading and knowledge are not continuous to each other. That's the biggest problem. After a few readings, you may go on reading the same text time and again, but you'll not derive any knowledge because there is a limitation. There's a limit to deriving knowledge by adopting the human reading methods. And that's exactly where these machines can help you. They can extend your understanding of a text by generating big data. So it may happen that one fine day we'll discover something new about Macbeth or Lady Macbeth that we have not been able to discover. We might have missed a few linguistic elements in the text, which the computational analysis or analysts can find for us. So these are some of the things which are very, very rich areas to generate big data. Authorship, textuality, even narration, how somebody narrates. Okay, that gives us an idea to understand how humans behave. How is a plot organized? Okay, how are characters delineated or sketched? Or even how is language used in a particular way to serve a particular function? So big data about these areas can be mined only when we apply computational analysis. So even sentiment analysis, these are new, text mining is being used to generate sentiment analysis, even topic modeling, even social networking analysis. Have you ever thought about the social network that is operational in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice? The social networking approaches, okay, in Pride and Prejudice or in Dickens's David Copperfield or Great Expectations, the social networking. So, or topic modeling. These are some of the things that are not possible humanly. Even if it is possible, it will take a whole lot of time, a whole lot of energy from humans. And you all know that in terms of, wisdom and intelligence, humans are gradually, it's on the decline mode, the human intelligence, with the advent of machines. So, and then there's categories of literary analysis as well. Discourse chunks, narration chunks, plot character, setting and space. So what kind of settings do you normally come across in Hardy's novels or in Dickens's novels or in Fielding's novels? These are the things. We know that it's the heath and the landscape and various other things, but it will go deeper into these things and even geospatial areas, locations as well. So that is how computational narrative computational literary studies has emerged as a very, very important area of human understanding, of research, and it will continue to be so for some time. But at the same time, I also tell you that this is not everything. That means if you are harboring any doubts in your mind that someday computers are going to replace human critics, it may not be or reality. Humans will continue to be important because there are still millions of certain layers that only humans can unravel and unfold, not the machines. So that's all for now. So thank you very much, uh, all of you. Now, if you have
Sir,
questions,
there are many questions waiting for you. Thank you so much, sir,
so,
for such an
I must
informative
tell you
lecture.
that, give me just a moment, please. I
Yes,
must tell
sir.
you that I'm here with you until 4:30. Since we started a little late, I
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
okay. Initially, it was 3 to 4, but
Yes.
it's 4:22 right now. So I have time until 4:30. Okay.
Uh,
So
all right,
if
sir. There are so many
I can
questions
take
that are
questions
waiting for
until
you.
4:30.
The very first one is from our side. That we would like to ask you that how do we use it actually? What are the tools that we use or we can use in day-to-day, like reading of a text, to understand this kind of big data or what we are using? Because we are not so much versed in technology for using big data. So how, as students of
Exactly.
literature, we can
Exactly.
use big data?
Exactly. So, data mining is the technology that is used. So, is the same data mining technologies. I mean, uh, people are mining data by using certain softwares. Okay? And we all know that all these literary texts are available to us in the digital form. When we talk about digital humanities, the beginning uh, was this. This is how it all began. I mean, we began to digitize these physically available, I mean, texts or works. So all these works are available in the digital form. So when we mine some data by using these softwares, all these people need these softwares to mine data. I mean, there's computational linguistics people or computational, medical science people, various. So they use this. There are various softwares that these people use, and they subject these texts to those softwares. Now it's only a matter of interest. Only those who are interested, they need to come forward and go for a training in those softwares so that they can also learn how to mine data from a certain data set. Okay. So you can mine data manually, that is humanly, or you can mine data using a computer. If the data set is huge, it's so big, then you need some machine to do it for you. As I told you, computer assisted research profiling. If you have 2 lakh research papers to read and review, is it humanly possible? The research, poor research scholar will, have to pass through several lives in order to be so. So it will be very, very difficult. But the machine can do it for you. So that is, if somebody is interested, people can come forward for training. So they can find these people who can train them, who can give them exposure in the software. Because at times it's not easy to learn it on your own. So you can attempt that, but it's not that easy to learn it on your own. So you need training from somebody, and then you're ready. You can do so.
All right, so thank you, sir, so much. There is another
Yeah.
question that asks that stimulation is common feature in human beings, yet the creation of literary works is done by some sublime people. My question is, what is the basic force or ability which makes anyone to write any literary work, though everyone feels the same experience on any situation? So it is basically trying to ask that why different people treat literature differently. It's from Rajiv Yadav.
Exactly. I told you that we all are different human beings. So
Yes.
we perceive. I mean, those who have ever taken any ink blot test, a very famous psychometric test. So the ink blot test. Forget the ink blot test. You are playing in the playground. Suddenly you look up and see uh, a piece of cloud in the sky, and you say, look at, there is an elephant. Look up, there is an elephant. Now your friend says, no, no, I can see a horse. And the other friend says, I cannot see either elephant or horse. I can see a big house. Now, we all have experienced this. That clearly suggests that we have different perceptual abilities and different understanding abilities. So this difference is very, very interesting. And this difference doesn't necessarily mean that our emotions, the experience of our emotions, will continue to be different. There is always a meeting ground. We meet each other at some point. So that is very, very important. When these mirror neurons are fired, that means this meeting ground is happening. In the same way, there was a time when no one had thought that computers and literature will ever come together to produce something new and meaningful. Today, they have met. So those people who in the initial days had expressed their suspicion now accept that, yes, this is very, very true. So that's how we all meet, although we are different from each other. Yes.
So there is a question from Ahmed Alvi, who is
Yes.
asking that is catharsis a manifestation of mirror neurons?
Of course. Of course. I mean, people used to call it catharsis, the purgation of excessive emotions. But nowadays, neuroscience, see, how does science help in our understanding of a non-science area of knowledge? Because literature has never been a part of science, although it has, science has borrowed heavily from literature, but literature has never been considered as science by the scientific community. Now, but science, puts things in perspective through logical procedures. So it is governed by the world of logic. So when science proves something objectively, then people, accept it, because we have a tendency to believe in the thing that exists, that is visible to us, and not believe in things that are not visible to us and that don't exist. So that's the reason why neuroscience has in fact strengthened that this particular aspect of literature is very, very substantial.
What would be the difference between the workings of these mirror neurons and the workings of the subconscious mind, which too distantly connects events, experiences, and situations?
Now, the subconscious mind, it's a psychological phenomenon, of course, and this is a neurological phenomenon. Although at some point, both these phenomena come together, psychological and the neurological. Neurological, this particular firing of neurons, these mirror neurons, is a logical result of your engagement with something. So when there is no engagement, the mirror neurons will never fire. But the subconscious will continue to work even in the absence of engagement. It's always on, it's never switched off. But mirror neurons will not fire until and unless you are engaged. And engaged in the true manner, in a manner that you are gradually transported to a different world. That's exactly what Longinus meant or said in his on the Sublime. Right.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the queries. And we are approaching the close of the session now. Right. And I think you have wonderfully delivered your lecture. Everyone was fully impressed, and they were also trying to ask so many questions because it is a totally new dimension and new area.
Please share those questions with me. I would love to answer those questions. Okay. I'll share my answers with you afterwards. Yes, please.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Purnima, Are you there? Dr. Purnima? Dr. Purnima? Okay, so in the
Yes, sir,
meantime,
I'm
not
there.
wasting that time. Okay,
Yes,
so
sir, I'm
invite
there.
Dr. Niharika Lal because sir is in a rush and yes.
So I'll share the questions directly with sir later on, and
Right.
Yes,
then
yes.
we can have the answers, and then we can post it in the groups, the Telegram groups. For now,
Right.
I'd like to call upon Dr. Niharika Lal for a formal vote of thanks. Dr.
Thank you, Dr.
Niharika Lal.
Purnima.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima. We are indeed fortunate that we had the privilege to listen to Dr. A.K. Mishra this afternoon. On behalf of the principal, Department of English, and entire staff of Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, as well as the members of English for Nation, I would like to thank you, sir, for your very comprehensive and interesting talk. We are all students of literature, and we know that literature is a direction of society. That is the first definition that we get of literature when we read any work. And you rightly pointed out that it is not a very important means of simulation, but is simulation itself. Not only do we encounter real life and characters and situations in literature, but it also provides us with an overwhelming urge to express ourselves. We also touched upon psycholinguistics or neurolinguistics, shedding light on the role the brain plays in the understanding and comprehension as well as appreciation of literary work. When we revisit the classics, computers help us in recovering data as well as understanding the language of stylistics of work. When a writer creates a world, and many views and perceptions are not stated obviously, but are contained between the lines. Language reveals the character. Today we talk about reading or focusing upon the text, and computational linguistics makes the task easy and more interesting in evaluating it. Thank you, sir, once again for astutely underscoring how in this technological age, students of literature can take the assistance of computers in their study and research. I take the opportunity to thank our principal, Professor Rachna Srivastava. It is her constant support and encouragement that enables us to progress programs which not only enlightens our students, but enhances our knowledge. It would be amiss on my part if I do not thank our participants and students for the invaluable input and queries which made the session fruitful and lively. I thank Dr. Purnima for smoothly conducting the session. I would like to thank the technical staff for ensuring that the session went off without any problem. Thank you all once again.
So thank you very much, everyone. Dr.
Thank you.
Rajesh, Dr. Rajesh, shall I leave? Would you allow me to leave now?
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you so
sir.
much.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Everyone,
Thanks
Thank
to
you,
all of
Niharika ma'am.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, sir. It was an amazing session.
Thank you.
May I know whether the next session is also going to happen in the same link itself?
Rajesh, there is a query.
Hi, dear organizers. May I know whether the next session on body and literature will also be held now itself?
The link will be shared on your Telegram group.
Ancient Greek philosophy, especially the Cynics, had this
Hello.
signature by which
Hello,
they talk
Dr.
about
Purnima
the
ji.
power of language. So
Hello.
language from Greek
Hello,
antiquity
Dr. Purnima ji.
has been considered
Yes, ma'am. I
We
can
have
hear you.
the same link for next sessions.
Yes, we will share the link over the next session. You can join with the same link. We'll try to keep the same link for the next session. And the link will be shared on your Telegram apps where you have joined already.
One more, can you share with us recorded sessions?
Yes, you can get the recording. It was shared on Facebook Live. We will connect with you through the mail. We will get all your information on your email
Where,
ID.
where?
On your email ID through which you have registered, ma'am.
I registered, ma'am.
You must have registered for the session through your email ID.
I registered. I attended the session since from the beginning. I
Yes,
want.
so you will get all the information on your email ID.
Thank you.
And you can drop your query directly to the organizers
Okay.
on the Telegram app or on the mail.
Okay, thanks.
The corpse only has the history of a being, the past of human being. It does not quite have the
I think
present
now there is no feedback form.
dynamic meaning, right? A meaning that is
Yes.
Is there any feedback form right now?
There is no meaning.
Feedback form will be generated on 26th August when all the
Yes, there is a history.
lectures will be over. So there will be a single feedback form for all the day.
Thank you, thank you. Now Telegram group and WhatsApp group, you will convey the mail ID.
Yes, all the information will be shared from time to time.
Thank you.
Figuration of